issue of Iranian financial assets that have been stolen, and to have discussions with the Qataris. It has nothing to do with Witkoff, it has nothing to do with Kushner, and it has nothing to do with negotiations. As I said, not even the foreign minister is going for such a thing to be meaningful. So some people, they've been making a big deal out of this, but there's no plan for Iran to go, regardless of no one. I mean, I'm very surprised how people, even in Iran, sometimes we see people who believe what Trump says, whereas Trump is the most dishonest person around, and it's universally acknowledged. But sometimes I'm surprised by some people here in Iran who take his word seriously. But there was no plan on the Iranian side. The Iranians didn't send a delegation today, and the delegation that is going tonight is a lower ranking delegation, which has to do with one file exclusively, and that has to do with the Qataris.
Yeah, which is basically related to that Iranian frozen asset, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. When you look at, we had Macron coming to the region and meeting with Omani government. It seems that he's seeking for some sort of, he has requested mine clearing corridor in the Strait of Hormuz, and he wants to send, I don't know, ships, these minesweepers, something like that. And is that going to be acceptable for Iran to let, even with the authorization? I don't know what is the communication, because in the recent days we've learned that Iran is communicating with Omani government. Then Omani government may have a different decision, not that much close to the Iranian ones. What is this sort of communication between the two sides?
Well, first of all, the Iranians have warned the French that they will not tolerate any French ships near the Strait of Hormuz, and removing mines is Iran's responsibility, and no one else's. And that is in accordance with MOU. The Iranians, the two sides agreed that the Iranians are going to regulate the Strait of Oman, the Strait of Hormuz. And and that is, of course, now a point of contention, which I'll explain. First of all, Oman, if the Iranians go and speak with them, they say one thing. When the Americans go and speak with them, they say another, because they're intimidated by the Americans. If you recall, a few weeks ago, Trump said he'll bomb and, I don't know, destroy Oman if they don't obey. And so Oman doesn't want to get into trouble. It's not, none of these countries are like Iran. And there is no country like Iran, to be very blunt, except for Yemen. But the Iranians have said that we will we'll control the Strait of Hormuz in future after these 60 days, jointly with Oman. But during these 60 days, the strait is exclusively under the control of Iran, and it will remain so. And if Oman doesn't want to cooperate with Iran after the 60 days, Iran says it doesn't matter. We're going to control it. Then we'll control the strait ourselves. So it's up to Oman to join us or not. Now, as I said earlier, in accordance with the agreement, the Iranians are supposed to control the straits and allow shipping to go through. And then in the second month, shipping is supposed to normalize. But the Americans, as they always do, they are violating the agreement. So in Lebanon, they violated the agreement, and they did a deal with the proxy government in Beirut, the government that they installed. Does not have popular legitimacy. And the Israelis, in order to allow the Israeli regime to stay in Lebanon, to keep southern Lebanon. And of course, their proxy government in Beirut gifted southern Lebanon to the Israelis because they are basically agents of the United States. So that is one violation, because according to the MOU, the Israeli regime has to go, and Iran is not going to accept anything except a full withdrawal. Trump's threats against Iran are violations. Trump's refusal to hand over Iran's stolen assets another violation. And the list goes on. And one is that the United States has forced Oman to declare a corridor for ships to pass through in the Strait of Oman. And Iran said, we are in charge in accordance with MOU. In other words, the Americans agreed to this. So the Iranians have warned ships not to use that corridor. And so basically, Iran and the United States are in conflict on multiple fronts because the Americans, as expected, and you and I have discussed this before multiple times, that from the very beginning, no one really believed that this MOU was going to be implemented because the Americans never implement their side of the bargain. They're always lying. They're always cheating. They're always stealing, as Pompeo once admitted. So the Iranians are using their leverage, and that is the Strait of Hormuz. And the more the United States refrain from carrying out their obligations, the more difficult Iran is going to make it for the Americans with regards to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That's how it works. If the Americans force the Israeli regime out, if the Americans stop threatening Iran, if they hand over Iranian assets, then the Strait of Hormuz would be opened. But if the other side is going to lie and cheat and steal, then the Iranians are going to refrain from carrying out their obligations in response.
What is the situation in the Strait of Hormuz today? Because based on the data, it seems that there's some 15 to 20 vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and which is not that much different from what it was during the war. It was 5 to 10. And
I don't know the number exactly today, but I think from what I understood, it was roughly 30 yesterday and 30 the day before. I don't know what it is today, but ever since the clashes between Iran and the United States and the threat made by the Iranian Navy, the Revolutionary Guards, naval forces in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf against the United States, because they also violated the agreement. Why? Because they attacked Iran. That's a violation. The Iranians were in control of the strait. A ship tried to pass through without Iran's consent, and Iran hit it with a light drone. And there wasn't much damage to that ship. And then the Americans bombed Iran. And Iran struck the Americans, I think it was in Bahrain. And then another ship tried to sail through. Iran hit that harder. And then the Americans bombed Iran more heavily, and not that heavily, but more heavily. And then Iran struck the Americans more heavily too. And then the Iranians issued a warning to ships in the Persian Gulf and to the Americans. Since then, the number of ships that have been passing through have decreased in number. So we don't have a normal situation, and it's reflective of the broader policy of Trump not to abide by his commitments.
Can we say that there would be no tit for tat attacks between the two sides?
Well, I think that this, if that happens, it will be initiated by the Americans, because that's how it's always been. It's always been the Americans who violate the ceasefire. Iran has never violated the ceasefire itself. The only thing that the Iranians would strike would be ships that ignore Iran's navy and try to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz without their permission. Then that would be their they have the authority to do that.
We had in the news, or maybe some rumors, that the United States said to Iran, without talking about nuclear program of Iran, there would be no, when it comes to the Iranian frozen asset, they're not going to release the Iranian frozen assets, since it's all dependent on the nuclear program of Iran, which is totally against what was said, what was written in the MOU between the two sides. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone reads the MOU carefully, it's obvious that the Americans are not abiding by their obligations, but the Iranians are not going to be um, uh, uh, intimidated. The Americans have to be seen as carrying out their obligations. In other words, there has to be real progress according to the text. I mean, if you have the text, or your viewers can read it. There has to be progress, real progress, not fake progress, and we're not seeing that. And so the Americans, that's why the Iranians did not send their their negotiating team, and they're not going to do so in the coming days, at least. The Americans have to make a decision. Are they going to? I mean, in Iran, this agreement was the minimum that was acceptable in Iran. And as you know, the leader, Ayatollah Seyed Mohammad Khamenei, he sought for more, sought for more, let's say, a stronger deal. Not that he was against the negotiations or that he was against a deal, but he wanted something stronger. But he then gave a mandate for negotiations. But in that mandate, it was clear that this is it. This is the minimum. So this has to be implemented in full. And the and so basically, President Pezeshkian wanted um, wanted this. He's not the negotiator, of course. Dr. Ghalibaf is. Some people think Dr. Ghalibaf and Dr. Pezeshkian are one and the same. They're not. They're very different people. But in any case, the leader accepted this deal because Dr. Pezeshkian said he will make sure that it is fully enforced. And Dr. Ghalibaf, being the negotiator, is a person who has to make sure that it is fully enforced and carried out. And so if the Americans think that they can wear Iran down or force Iran to give new concessions or anything, it's not going to work. I mean, the deal is not a bad deal, but we know that the Americans are that the Americans are liars, that they cheat, and they're completely dishonest. And so we know that the chances for this deal were never from. I mean, you and I discussed this. I was never very optimistic about the deal. The only thing that I felt could force the United States to carry out this deal in full was the threat of economic disaster. And the Iranians know that. And that's why they're not going to give up their leverage in the Strait of Hormuz. So when the United States tries to open up the Strait of Hormuz in violation of the agreement, that's what they want to do. They want to take away Iran's leverage, and then they would refrain from carrying out their obligations, and Iran would have nothing to counter that. But the Iranians are not going to accept this. So Iran is prepared to go to war. And as we speak, Iran is prepared to go to war. They've been preparing themselves for another war since the first day of the ceasefire. And the belief is that there is a big since then. And Iran has exported a large quantity of oil during this period because a lot of its tankers, which were full, were stuck. So those tankers are on their way to the markets in East Asia, and that will assist Iran in the coming weeks and months. But if the Trump regime does not begin implementing its side of the bargain, then the economic situation is not going to improve, and it will actually become more critical. So it's really up to the United States. They are creating this crisis for the world and for themselves. And it goes back to the Zionist lobby. The United States does not want to implement the deal because the Zionist lobby doesn't want this. Otherwise, this deal is to the benefit of the United States. It's to the benefit of the world. It's to the benefit of Iran, the implementation of this deal. The only actors that do not benefit from normalization between Iran and the United States is the Zionist regime. So, under no circumstances are the Iranians going to give any concessions with regards to the current MOU. It has to be carried out in full. Otherwise, it won't be ultimately implemented. And each step that has that I mean, if Iran is going to carry out any steps on its side of the deal, it will depend on what the Americans do.
Yeah. Here is paragraph number 5 of the MOU. It says, upon the signing of this MOU, Iran will make arrangements using its best effort for the safe passage of commercial vessels with no charge for 60 days from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa. The traffic of commercial vessels will immediately start in considering the need for removing technical and military obstacles and demining by the Islamic Republic of Iran within 30
By
days.
the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yeah.
No one else, not the French, not the Americans.
Iran will conduct a dialogue with the Omani government to define the future administration and maritime services in the Strait of Hormuz. There is no mention of the United States being involved in the Strait of Hormuz. And these two attacks recently is because of what has happened between the two sides.
That's right.
Seems, yeah.
That's right. So Iran is acting within its authority in accordance with MOU. In other words, even the Americans acknowledge this. Not that Iran cares or needs the Americans to acknowledge anything, but for the sake of this agreement, for the sake of this broader agreement, even the Americans have acknowledged this. And Iran will be in discussions with Oman. But if Oman doesn't want to be a part of it, then Iran will do it itself after the 60 days. Right now, it's just Iran. So Iran will not accept the French coming in. They'll strike their ships, no doubt. And they'll not accept Americans imposing any corridors. They will make sure that the number of ships that pass through, or those ships that pass through, go through with the Iranian consent. Otherwise, it's going to be bad news for the shipping companies and the insurance companies and the crew of the owners of the ships.
We have a new MOU between Lebanon and Israel, which I would say is because American considering Iran US MOU, this is the anti-Iran US MOU. Somehow they tried to go against the MOU with Iran. And basically the first paragraph, which is about the situation in Lebanon, how the sovereignty of Lebanon should be respected and they have to withdraw from Lebanon, no war in Lebanon. Then they came with the new MOU to somehow go against the MOU they made with Iranians. So looking at the paragraphs of that, basically saying that Israel is going to stay, they're going to stay in the southern part of Lebanon as long as Hezbollah is not disarmed. And the only important point about the MOU, which was mentioned by the head of the Lebanese parliament, Nabi Berri, is that he argued that the agreement cannot simply be implemented by the executive branch alone, and they have to ratify it because this is not an agreement. This is a MOU, as it says. It's a roadmap. And do you think that the United States, because of their capitulation in the MOU they had with Iranians, they had to come somehow? They felt that they have to come out with a new MOU to contradict what they've done with Iranians?
Yes, no doubt, that this MOU between Lebanon and the Israeli regime, which was imposed on Lebanon. And it's illegal in accordance with Lebanese law because negotiating with the Israelis is illegal. So the whole process is illegal. But this MOU is not in the interest of the United States. It's in the interest of Netanyahu. So, and it's of course a violation of the MOU with Iran. So the president and the prime minister of Lebanon were installed by the Americans and the Saudis. And they are there to basically do the bidding of the United States and the Israeli regime. And of course, the Saudis too. The Saudis have a very strong interest in destroying the resistance. Remember, always keep in mind that who funded, there's I think it's an email between Hillary Clinton and Podesta, I think, or her campaign manager. I think he was her campaign manager.
But that's
And
yeah.
yes, Podesta. And in it, she says, I think she says ISIL, which is ISIS. That Saudi Arabia and Qatar fund ISIS, or ISIL, as she called it. That is, that, so the Saudis, when, and of course Erdogan too, and Qatar, all of the, and other these oil-rich countries in the Persian Gulf, which are proxies of the United States, they all funded ISIS. They all hate the resistance. Their whole objective was to destroy the resistance. And so the Saudis and the Americans, they're together trying to destroy the resistance in Lebanon now with the Israelis. And so these two people, the president and the prime minister, were installed under duress by the United States. They made threats against MPs, said, we'll sanction you, we'll, just like they do with officials and UN officials which criticize Israel, or the ICC, or whoever criticizes Israel or seeks to punish the Israeli regime. The Americans go and sanction them, threaten them with sanctions, or find some woman to claim that they raped her or whatever, So here they went and signed this MOU. And the interesting thing is that this is coming at a time when the Israeli regime is isolated and despised across the world, and going against the grain, the Lebanese government is actually legitimizing the regime and recognizing the regime through direct talks. So you would think that first, at least, if they're going to betray their country and betray the Palestinian people and betray the law of Lebanon, which doesn't allow them to do that, they would get a huge concession from the Israeli regime. They got nothing. They gifted, first of all, the Israelis went almost immediately afterwards and murdered a lieutenant general and his entourage in the south of Lebanon. And the Lebanese government gifted southern Lebanon to the Israeli regime and gave them full authority to do whatever they want. So this is not really, this is not legitimate. And the government in Lebanon is not really legitimate because they've betrayed the law, they betrayed the constitution and the country. But in any case, this is being done in order for the Americans to please Netanyahu, because the MOU is obviously against the interests of Netanyahu, and so in order to compensate, Trump is doing this. And remember, every single, except for the siege, the United States is not abiding by any of its commitments. So some people may say, and I've heard many say, then why did Iran accept the MOU? Well, because Iran is exporting and importing too. So the strait is not fully open, as we're seeing. So the Americans did not get what they want. Those who think that the Americans got what they want, they're not getting what they want. What they want is 150, I don't know how many ships would go through a day, 150, 200, 170. I don't know exactly how many go a day. And at the moment, except for one day when they opened the corridor, which I think it went up to 70, the number of ships are much lower. So Iran is exporting and importing, and others are exporting and importing in a limited degree. So this MOU is not a victory for the United States. I mean, the MOU is a victory for Iran, but by refraining from implementation, it doesn't bring about a victory for the United States. It creates a stalemate because the Americans are not getting what they sought because they violated the deal, and the Iranians will not give them what they seek until they implement the deal.
Yeah. Do you think that, I think one of the main concerns right now would be as time goes by and Iran tries to control the Strait of Hormuz, because we have to understand that the Strait is some like 25 kilometers wide
That's
and
right.
something like
It's not
12.
international waters as we've discussed together multiple times. It's Iranian and Omani waters. It's not wide enough to be an international waterway.
So, what would be the reason for the United States to be in the region? And the latest attack, what is the assessment on the part of Iran? Are they using Saudi Arabia or some of these GCC countries to attack Iran, or they're using their, aircraft carriers, those fighter jets, or maybe Jordan, these fighter jets that are coming to the Iranian borders to attack Iran? Because
You mean
in the southern part of Iran,
you
close
mean,
to Syriac area, it's.
I don't know. I haven't asked that. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. So I should refrain from speculating because that deserves a very clear answer and accurate answer. What I can say though is that in retaliation to U.S. violations over the past few weeks, not just these two violations during the weekend or a couple of days ago, 3-4 days ago, not just these, but the previous U.S. violations, the Iranians did not bomb the Emirates, they did not bomb Saudi Arabia, and they did not bomb Qatar, but they bombed Kuwait